The Phoenix facility, where a patient in a coma was raped and eventually gave birth, faced a criminal investigation over 2 years ago. But unfortunately, that investigation was dropped, and the chief law enforcement officer who was investigating the facility, Charlie Loftus, was forced out under suspicious circumstances. That chief law enforcement officer, Charlie Loftus, joins us now on the Damage Report. Charlie, welcome to the show.
Hello, John. Thank you for having me.
I'm glad to have you here, although I wish it was about a more optimistic story because this entire thing stinks. So the story that got everyone interested in this facility, the tragic case of this patient who was raped, I think most people are familiar with that, but you had been interested in this facility for other reasons in advance of that. So what did you found that made you want to investigate that facility?
In mid 2016, around the area of May, June, the chief auditors at the Arizona Department of Economic Security came to me and said they had some abnormal billing practices from a facility called Hacienda Healthcare. Now, Arizona DES is basically the welfare manager for the state of Arizona. I came from the Arizona Attorney General's office, where I was assistant special agent in charge. I was over the major fraud for all southern Arizona, the narcotics, statewide narcotics, the terrorism units, the forfeiture units, and public corruption units. So I came over to DES at invitation to help professionalize their law enforcement, and one of the first cases they brought me was this case called Hacienda. And apparently Hacienda had been investigated a few years prior, but what they had done was as Hacienda has several smaller companies under the Hacienda umbrella, and they were basically double, triple billing for the same services: transportation, room space, equipment, and the state just didn't catch on to what it was. And over this 1 year period, it was approximately a $4 million overbill. Now, this has been an ongoing situation with this particular facility for a couple, maybe 5 or 6 years prior to that. And the owner and the CEO of the corporation, the facility, was refusing to cooperate, not releasing any information, even after subpoenas. So the auditors, we had about a 45 person auditor team, brought this case to us, and I had about probably a little just shy of 20 sworn investigators there, but it was partly outside their skill set. But moreover, what's important is all these men and women, these investigators, reported to the governor, and they're at-will employees, so they can be fired for any reason at any time, including myself. So we packaged the case, and I presented it to the Arizona Attorney General's office, the former agency that I worked for, and I was assistant chief for, and they opened a criminal case for fraud on Hacienda Healthcare. Within about 2 weeks after that, we were fired. And one of the big things that was discussed was not just the criminal case, but we were going to stop the contract with the Hacienda. Now, if you stop the contract, it's really pass-through money to from the feds. So they were about 300% above normal facilities per patient than national average. And so what happens if you cancel the contract? That pass-through money, that federal money that comes through the feds, through Arizona, into this facility is not allowed anymore. So you have to find an alternate location for these patients, or the state has to pay. Now, some of these patients are in very bad shape. They're on ventilators, and some of the costs are up around $10,000 a day for some of these patients. So you can see the concern for upwards around 35 patients, not only moving severely ill children, these are all children, by the way, or young adults, to other facilities, but also to manage their families, manage their health care, all in a nice, seamless transition, all while doing a criminal investigation on the facility. Of course, the facility was facing being shut down at that point. They have far more than 35 patients, but this is the cream of their billing. Of course, if they're able to bill 300% the normal average for a patient, they're certainly making a lot of money.
Yeah.
So the DES staff, the non-cops, the DES staff that were charged with this humanitarian crisis were terrified, because we were told over and over again, and many of these people had contact with the owner and operator of the facility. His name was William Timmons. That he often boasted that he was friends with the governor, Doug Ducey. And matter of fact, we did get some pushback from the governor's office in that there were some concerns about shutting this or having this facility investigated. Short comes to push that when I was told that there was connections, I had a pretty big staff, but I personally went online and looked at the Arizona Secretary of State's website and saw, in fact, that this guy Timmons was a donor to Doug Ducey, and I had big concerns. And
I think understandably. So look, the entire thing obviously seems very suspicious, very dirty. We know that now, thanks to this tragedy, sort of a silver lining, this facility has renewed scrutiny. I guess the idea is that were you and your compatriot not to have been fired and the investigation went forward, it's possible that some of these further crimes wouldn't have been committed. Is there any possibility that now that your story is being looked at once again, that there's any sort of responsibility that anyone that shut down this investigation, if there is like influence, the fact that there was money, that there might be people held responsible for this facility continuing to operate?
Well, this is politics at its worst. The motivation was taking care of a donor and a donor source. In Arizona, we have a lot of issues with dark money. The chief of staff for Governor Ducey was a gentleman by the name of Kirk Adams. And he was in the California news a few years ago for big campaign violations. He took some money from a charitable organization and moved it to a nonprofit in Arizona for dark money contributions, and he was charged with campaign violations in California, even though he's an Arizona resident, and fined $1 million. So that gives you an idea of the characters I'm dealing with here. Yeah. So yes, and I don't say it could have been prevented. It would have been prevented because we were going to shut down that location in that no patient receiving state funds would have been able to go to that facility. So that patient, even though she was there prior to our investigation, she would have been moved to another facility.
Yeah. Well, that makes the already tragic story even sadder. I hope that now people will pay attention to your story. People will look into this more. It is a really dark example of how corrosive money and politics can be when mixed. And Charlie, I want to thank you for joining us on the Damage Report and sharing your experience with us.
Thank you for having me. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you very much for watching this clip from the Damage Report. If you liked it, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and ring the bell on YouTube to get notifications of our new videos. And of course, you can catch the full Damage Report live every weekday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific on TYT Network on YouTube TV.